Republicans are bringing up a rule for two bills that will be debated on the floor this week. I look forward to that debate. But I feel compelled to focus on this majority's screwed up priorities, which now include handing a get-out-of-jail-free card to KKK members, Proud Boys, and other criminals who violently beat cops within an inch of their lives on January 6, 2021. I thought this election was about lowering costs. What the hell happened? I thought it was about securing the border. I thought it was about making sure that our communities are safe. Not whatever the hell these pardons are. These pardons are sick. They are offensive. They are un-American. And I don't ever want to hear about law and order from your side again, Mr. Speaker, when your side is letting criminals back on the streets. Criminals who beat cops and tried to overthrow our government.
Are now the defenders of the stronghold of democracy and of equal opportunity.
You and I, as citizens, have the obligation to shape the debates of our time, not only with the votes we cast, but with the voices we lift.
The people are looking for honest answers, not easy answers.
The very word secrecy is repugnant.
Clear leadership.
And we are, as a people,
not false claims and evasiveness and politics as usual.
Opposed to secret societies.
As a people, we cannot afford to let any group of citizens or any individual citizens live or labor under conditions which are injurious to the Commonwealth.
Black, white, Latino, Asian, Native American, young, old, gay, straight, men, women, folks with disabilities, all pledging allegiance under the same proud flag to this big, bold country that we love. That's what I see. That's the America I know.
Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
There is nothing wrong with America that cannot be cured by what is right with America.
Welcome to the Aggressive Progressive Podcast. I am your host, Chris Hahn. Thank you for liking, rating, reviewing, subscribing, and telling your friends about this. Please share it broadly and widely. Okay, another hectic week. Let's talk. I'm just trying to understand Trump's thinking on Ukraine. And his thinking on talking to China and Russia about arms reduction. Now, I'm all for arms reduction. Don't get me wrong. I am not a hawk. And I think if you really wanted to go after waste in the government, the place I would start is the place that gets most of the money, which is the military, right? Most of the discretionary spending that Congress has is in the military. What's the old saying? The bank robber said, "Why do I rob banks? Because that's where the money is." But a 50% reduction in China's military and a 50% reduction in Russia's military and a 50% reduction in our military are not the same things. We spend significantly more than Russia and China combined on our armed forces, significantly more. So, well, I think it'd be great if we reduced our military spending by 50%. I think them reducing their military expenditures by 50% is not the same thing. And I think that I don't trust Russia as far as I can throw them. So I wouldn't agree to any deal with them on what they are going to do that we can't really see them doing it. But let me talk about Ukraine for a minute. President Trump started a conversation with Putin about Ukraine. And this week we'll be holding talks in Saudi Arabia, of all places, with Russia about Ukraine. Noticeably absent from those conversations are Ukraine and Europe. J.D. Vance went to the European Security Conference Summit last week and lectured the Europeans about free speech, and then he went and spoke to a far-right group in Germany, a far-right group that doesn't want to apologize for past atrocities, doesn't even want to acknowledge that they even happened. And I don't know. let me just point this out. There are a lot of conservative Jews in America that voted for these guys. And J.D. Vance is basically cozying up last week to the successors of the Nazi Party. Now, I don't want to say that they're the same as the Nazi Party. Maybe that's probably a little, maybe calling them successors probably a little bit, I don't know, a little much. But they sure as hell want to pretend that that didn't happen. And I'm not cool with that. And if J.D. Vance wants to say that's free speech, well, that's fine. I guess it is free speech. But the Germans and the Europeans are well aware of the past that is not even that far behind. I mean, there are still people living who are survivors of the Holocaust. I am the grandson of a survivor, of two survivors of the Holocaust. And, the thought of people denying that it even happened or, want, Germany to forget about it in much of the same way that, Trump here in the United States wants America to forget about slavery and wants America to forget about, Jim Crow and other things that happened, in our recent past. I mean, Jim Crow is our recent past. Really, was law of the land until the Civil Rights Act in the 1960s. You want to call it free speech to deny that? I guess you're allowed to say that it didn't exist. But I think it's incumbent on everyone in America when we talk about these things to acknowledge it existed and that it was a problem that we are still working to rectify. And America, I'm not one of those people who think things are horrible in this country. I think things are a lot better than they were, or at least they were, on January 19th of this year. They were a lot better on January 19th. I think people want to turn back the clock here, and they want to turn back the clock to a time that was not better. But things have moved forward, markedly better in the United States of America. But that doesn't mean it can't get better, and it doesn't mean we should forget about what happened, because if we forget about what happened, it'll happen again. And maybe it'll be a different group this time, but it'll happen again. And maybe it'll be you that it happens to. In America today, prejudice happens a lot more by class. It's expanded, I should say. It still happens on the basis of race and the basis of sex, for sure. But it is expanded to class. So if you're, one of those, lower income, uneducated people who voted for Donald Trump, who thinks that all this stuff's going to fly by you and make your life better, I'm telling you it's not. And frankly, it hasn't made your life better yet. Guy's been in office now for a month. Egg prices are up. Gas prices are up. Employment is down. Stock market is down. By every measure, he is not doing what people elected him to do on the economy. The economy continues to suffer under Trump. And who's that hurting most? I am your host, Chris Hahn. I'm at Christopher Hahn on X, Christopher Hahn, NY on Instagram, and ChristopherHahn.com. Those are my socials. Hey, look, if you're not watching me on YouTube, at The Aggressive Progressive on YouTube, that's my YouTube channel. You could watch me do these podcasts. And of course, the Aggressive Progressive podcast, audio version only, comes out every Tuesday, wherever you get your audio podcasts. Watch me on News Nation. I'm on there a lot too. So check me out there on my television home, News Nation, news for all Americans. So, so this Ukraine stuff is bothering me. And I know I talked a little bit already about the savior complex. And I kind of got to go back to it, right? I don't want to move on from that. It boggles my mind that, I grew up in the church, America. You know this. I've told you this story. I grew up in the evangelical church. And while I disagree on a lot of things with evangelicals, at least the ones I grew up with, I always thought they were good people, that they meant well, right? That their hearts were in the right place, that they wanted better lives for their families and their friends, and that they wanted to serve their communities and be good stewards and, basically do as Jesus would do, right? Help those in need. I know that Trump just puts these things out to rile people like me up, but, as much as I want to not talk about them, it is kind of my job to talk about them. I compared him earlier to David Koresh. And David Koresh, the Branch Davidians, it was a cult in the 90s who they were abusing children and doing other things, keeping guns illegally. And the Department of Justice was going to basically raid the compound, and he burned the place to the ground. There was a standoff for like a month, maybe more. Big thing in the 1990s when I was in law school or college. I don't know. It was one of those. But he thought he was a savior, right? David Koresh thought he was a savior. Many of you heard of Jonestown. Jonestown thought he was a savior. There was this group that, I can't remember the name of it, but it was in the late 90s that was following the Hale-Bopp comet. He thought he was a savior, and he killed all of his followers. I mean, I'm not saying Trump's going to kill us all, but some of the things he's doing is going to burn this country to the ground, right? It's tax season. I know a lot of you are waiting on your tax returns and will be filing your taxes and expect to get money back from the government. Some of us have to pay the government. If you're waiting on your tax return, and Elon Musk, as we are doing our taxes and people are expecting their tax returns, he's about to, go into the IRS and do his Doge Act there. I don't know. Will it delay your tax returns? Because if it does, will you be mad about it? All of this stuff he's doing, the government, slashing people, slashing positions and, cutting departments. It's all great until people start missing the services, right? It's hard to argue politically against some of the stuff, right? Because Americans believe that government is bloated, and they probably are right. Government is not efficient. It's surely not efficient. But, you got to cut the fat out and leave the protein, right? You got to leave the meat that's still good in place. What he's doing is just taking an axe to the whole thing, and you're losing good and bad. And then services will suffer. And he thinks he's doing this as the savior of the country, as if the country was so bad, without him. In fact, I'm sorry, this chaotic mess. I know that people who have voted for him are still, holding out hope that it's all going to work out because they were already fooled into voting for him, right? Once people commit to something and they put it on their Facebook page, and their 100 friends see it, they can't back off. And they're not going to back off Trump just yet. But when it actually impacts them, will they acknowledge it? Or will they pretend it's not happening? This is one of the things I always wonder in today's day and age. I mean, I make mistakes all the time. I say things are going to happen that don't happen. And then I come here and I tell you that I was wrong. I mean, I admit, I thought Trump was going to lose. He won. I was wrong. I admit it. I admit that the strategy that the Democrats ran the last 4 years was wrong. But a lot of people in this world today with significantly lower profiles than I do will never admit they're wrong, right? It's a lot easier to fool somebody than getting them to admit they were fooled. And a lot of people in this country were fooled by Donald Trump. He said he was going to get the economy back on track and get them better lives. Well, their lives have not improved yet. And I don't see anything in his planning right now that's going to improve their lives. In fact, everything I'm seeing from the tariffs on down, and especially the tariffs, are going to make your lives harder. And when it actually hits you, maybe it's weeks from now, maybe it's months from now, maybe it's a year from now, maybe it's 2 years from now, are you going to admit that you were fooled or probably not? And then you're going to have to, it's going to come down to when you get into that polling booth and it's just you and God, what are you going to do? There's a lot of bad things going on in this country right now. And this savior talk makes me really nervous. It should make you nervous too. Especially if you're a good Christian who's, you've seen it. You've heard this before. You've read the Bible and you know that you should have you shouldn't be having false idols. You shouldn't be worshiping a false idol. Donald Trump wants to be worshipped as a false idol. He's saying he's the savior of America. I mean, himself. He's saying it himself. Now, I know he's quoting Napoleon. But he's quoting Napoleon. Napoleon was a dictator. Cozying up with Putin, dictator. Doing peace talks in Saudi Arabia where they have a king who's a dictator. I don't like it. I think he wants to divide the world up into spheres of influence. That's what I think. I think that's his foreign policy. I think that's the Trump doctrine. That's not going to work in today's day and age. And it won't be good for us long term, even short term. Anyway, pay attention. I'm going to remind you now, as I always do, to seek the truth. Question everyone and everything, even me. Seek the truth. I know it's out there, and I know you'll find it if you look for it. And I'll be back here again real soon to tell you the truth as I see it. I'm Chris Hahn. Thanks for joining me on the Aggressive Progressive Podcast.